Welcome, everyone, to our Beavers Caucus webcast. I'm Katie Fast, Executive Director of Government Relations for Oregon State University. I'm excited to welcome you here this afternoon for a conversation with Oregon House District Representative and OSU alumni David Gomberg and OSU President F. King Alexander. This webcast is presented by the Beaver Caucus, OSU's passionate group of alumni and friends who advocate for OSU with the state's policymakers. The caucus organizes advocates to engage with lawmakers through emails, letters, and direct calls to representatives on behalf of key issues important to OSU and higher education. Please visit the Beaver Caucus website at thebeavercaucus.org to learn how you can become an advocate. This Monday, Oregon legislators were sworn in, and the 2021 legislative session will convene next week. Today, we will talk about key issues facing OSU with Representative Gomberg and key issues facing District 10 in the legislature. If you have any questions for President Alexander or Representative Gomberg, please submit them in the question box. Representative David Gomberg is an OSU alumni and small business owner, kite flyer, and former OSU Student Body President. Representative Gomberg has served the Central Coast, which includes Lincoln, Polk, Tillamook, and Yamhill Counties, since 2012. Representative Gomberg serves on the Joint Ways and Means Committee and is a member of the Governor's Commission on Senior Services, the Ocean Science Trust, the Oregon Innovation Council, and is co-chair of the Coastal Caucus. President F. King Alexander is OSU's 15th president and is a prominent national advocate for advancing equal opportunity for all people through higher education. He is passionate to provide access and affordable education to all learners and has provided congressional testimony on barriers to equal opportunity for college students, college affordability. President Alexander has experience working with state and federal legislators, and we are excited to work with him on behalf of OSU. Thank you, President Alexander and Representative Gomberg, for taking time with us today. President Alexander, would you like to start by sharing some impacts OSU has had in District 10 and around the state of Oregon?
Sure, I'll just share and just welcome everybody to this webcast. And I think it's been a month or two since we last met, but I think this is the time when the rubber meets the road, when our legislature meets. We've got a lot of good stories to tell on the part of Oregon State University. We're the only university that's growing right now, and significantly. We're at our largest enrollment in history, with the fastest growing institution in the state, or part of our institution is our OSU Cascades institution, which has remarkable potential to grow, and we'd like to see someday we have 5,000 students at Cascades. In addition to that, I think there's a lot of optimism on the horizon. There's going to be a new discussion about science and research, new funding at the federal level, and being the state's largest research production institution, of which we set an all-time record last year of generating $450 million in research activity. A lot of issues that we work on are the issues at NSF, NIH, and a whole new infusion of federal funding will be going to, we believe, in the spring. So we're positioned very well at the federal level to take full advantage of climate change research funding, of health disparity research funding that we already see happening, with the Senate already talking about it under Senator Schumer's bill, which is the Endless Frontiers Act, which is $100 billion in infusion into our national academies of science. Also, our enrollments, I just point out, we're actually, despite this pandemic, COVID, this everything we've been dealing with, we're up about 15% in applications for next year. So our growth is something that is not going on throughout Oregon, but it's also not going on throughout the United States, because most of the universities have experienced about a 4% drop in enrollment, but community colleges have experienced anywhere from a 12 to 17% drop. I believe in Oregon, it's 21%. So we're really bucking a lot of the trends out there, thanks to your help, the work of our foundation, the work of our students, faculty, and staff. And regarding COVID, I was just on the phone with our governor's office, offering up an opportunity to get more people vaccinated as quickly as possible, which involve our extension services, our extension programs, because we are in every county and we're trusted in every county. We do believe that we can work on the education of the importance of getting vaccinated, as well as the logistics of getting vaccinated. We will be setting up here in Reeser parking lot. It'll be a vaccination station. We believe that will start on the 26th of January. So please check the order where you fall on these rankings, because OSU is going to be very engaged, not in just determining how infected our communities have been through our TRACE program, but also helping to solve this horrendous problem and solve this horrendous disease. So I'd like to thank Representative Gomberg for joining us today. With all of his accomplishments, I think the most important one was that he was our student government president at Oregon State University. So Representative, thank you for being such a great advocate for us and on the coast, but also our Hatfield campus, and all the work that you do for us. We look forward to working with you as we go forward. So thank you, Katie.
So now, Representative Gomberg, would you like to share some remarks regarding the session?
Well, thank you so much, Katie. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, everybody who's joining us today. Thank you for your commitment to Oregon State University. Thank you for your commitment to higher education here in Oregon. And thank you for your understanding of the relationship between higher education and our Seed Grant programs and our extension programs, and how they relate to our economic health as well as to our economic future. So let me begin by stating the obvious. We are experiencing unprecedented times in our state, across our country, and around the globe. Unprecedented this year in terms of our health challenges. We are facing challenges with wildfires. We have been facing challenges with finally beginning to address equity and systemic racism in our culture, and more recently, the frictions resulting from our national election. So unprecedented times. And what I say to people here at home is that the year 2020 didn't begin on January 1st for all of us. It took a few months to really land on us with a thud. And I don't expect that 2021 is going to begin to kick in for a while either. So what does that all mean for the legislative session? Well, as this year has been unprecedented, I will tell you that we are going to be moving into a legislative session unlike one we have ever seen before. And the best example of that is that while committees are going to be meeting, they are going to be meeting remotely for the first 2 months. And we are not going to be physically going into the Capitol and holding floor sessions. We're not going to be going in physically to hold committee meetings. We're not going to be going in physically to meet with advocates and constituents. Rather, we're going to be dealing with most of that remotely like we're having the meeting here today, electronically. Now, some people would argue that this provides, in some ways, better access. You don't have to drive over from Eastern Oregon or for the Oregon coast, or from Southern Oregon and for Portland for your 5 minutes in front of a committee. You can just simply do that in the comfort of your own home by logging in with your computer. But other people would argue that the lack of public access, the lack of in-person public access diminishes your ability to really affect the legislative process. And I believe, Katie, that both of those perspectives are absolutely correct, that we have more access than ever before, that electronic government works, although it doesn't work particularly well. I hope that everybody listening is going to become very familiar with the Oregon Legislative Information System, or OLIS for short, OLIS. If you Google that, you can find out what committees are meeting today. You can watch those committees. You can find out what bills have been introduced, how people voted on bills, and you can track the progress of budget issues and make sure that, that you are well informed with what's going on in the Capitol. I am hopeful that we're going to begin to move out of this COVID restrictive period in the next few months and begin to get back into the Capitol where we can meet with people. But it is certainly an unprecedented time, and it's presenting us with unprecedented challenges. Now, I know that, that a lot of your listeners have questions about particular programs. They have questions about budgets. They have questions about how they can be more effective. So I'm going to take a breath at this point and let you share some of those questions with myself and with the president.
That is a great transition, Representative Gomberg. And, you know, as we're talking about the legislative session, and you really gave a good sense on, you know, how the Capitol is going to be operating remotely. Besides getting more familiar with OLIS, which the link to that has been put in the chat today. Do you have other advice for Beaver Caucus members and Oregon State supporters on just tips on engaging with the legislature in this remote setting now?
Well, let's start with this. It's not uncommon for about a third of the legislature to be brand new. Incoming members of the House and incoming members of the Senate, there are a lot of freshmen, not more than typical, but still as anywhere from a quarter to a third of the members are brand new. It's not uncommon for me to sit down and meet with advocates. For example, last year I met with people from Bend who were very, very interested and concerned about the future of the Cascade campus. And that's all well and good for a group of people from Bend to come over and sit down with a coastal legislator and talk about the future of their community. I think the real strength of Oregon State is the fact that we have graduates across the entire breadth of the state of Oregon, as well as outside the state, of course, as well. But we've got people everywhere. We've got Beaver believers in Portland and in Eastern Oregon and in Southern Oregon and on the Oregon coast. And rather than having people come from outside my district to meet with me and to advocate for the campus, I think our strength is that each legislator can have people from their own districts coming and meeting and talking to them about their concerns for higher education and for the various campuses that we'd like to see grow and thrive. We need to take advantage of the fact that we've got Beavers everywhere.
I love it. I have another question for you, Representative, before we move to President Alexander. You know, as you talked about these unprecedented times and the safety issues that we've seen at the national Capitol and even in Oregon, you know, it takes a time to reflect that Oregon has always prided itself on having a very open and accessible Capitol building. Can you share how that might be changing? As you know, I know the Capitol will be closed at the very beginning, but as the Capitol reopens, also, you know, there's been reports that the start of session will be delayed a few days because of safety issues. Can you share and reflect on that a bit, please?
Goodness. Well, let's start with this. The Capitol, like many public buildings and private businesses, is closed because of COVID. And so we have begun to see protests gathering at the Oregon State Capitol demanding access to the building and access to the democratic process. And I touched on the fact, the pros and cons of remote government a few minutes ago, but those protests that evolved into violence were very distressing to the people inside the building. And it was just, it was horrifying to watch out of our office windows, people that were trying to break windows, people that assaulted the press, people that got into assaults with our state police and city police. That was very distressing. I've never seen anything like that before in Salem. Do I support public protest? Absolutely. Do I support violence and destruction of property and assaults on people? Absolutely not. I think most of our listeners today are well familiar with our state capitol, and we have a remarkably open building. There are no metal detectors at the Oregon State Capitol, and we've had protests where not only do people come in with concealed carry permits, but with open carry. And that's an astounding sight to see people walking through the Capitol Rotunda and visiting individual offices carrying long guns. It's something we pride ourselves on, that we have an open Capitol. And I'm certainly hopeful that we're going to be able to continue that practice, but I don't know how recent events are going to affect the future of that access. Now, let me very quickly add that the Capitol is open, but it's also very secure. You know, there are cameras everywhere. We had that one incident that took place back earlier 2 weeks ago, and the news media have now published video taken from 4 different cameras, 4 different perspectives of that one particular incident. There are cameras everywhere. There are warning and emergency buzzers everywhere, including each of the desks in my front office and underneath my my own desk. There are uniformed and plainclothes police everywhere in the building. Not to discourage participation, not to discourage interaction, but to be wary of potential problems. So certainly we've received briefings from, we've received rather straightforward briefings about this new personal safety environment. And our staff have as well. We're taking steps to keep our staff out of the building, both because of COVID, but also because of safety concerns. I've given you a long non-answer to your question, because I don't know what the future of security and openness will be in the Capitol, but I hope that our better angels will prevail, and that we will step back from the confrontations that we're currently seeing and return to a place where we can come in and civilly express our very strong, heartfelt opinions in a safe and productive way.
Thank you. I know the participants today really appreciate your reflection on that, because it is such a top of mind issue right now. Moving over to President Alexander, we do have a question. The governor's recommended budget recommends flat funding for higher education. There's curiosity of how that would impact our public universities' base funding.
So first of all, we appreciate the governor and Representative Gomberg and what they did in the last special session and holding us whole. What we need to get everybody to understand is that a flat budget doesn't necessarily, we don't have flat costs. So the mandated costs or fixed costs, as we've called them in other states, or to continue doing exactly what we're doing with the number of classes moving forward, with extension, with 4-H, we have to come up with about a 6% budget increase. That's about those resources that we're going to have to find, because we don't have flat budgets. But we do appreciate not getting cut as well, but we will have to find some revenues of some kind to offset that 6%. And that's why the higher education, the universities and colleges are asking for about a 7.4% increase from our state legislature. That will cover those cost increases, and it will result in us not having to go into long scenario discussions about tuition and fee increases that might have to happen to offset that 6.1%. budgetary increase that we're going to have to swallow one way or another. So we, in many ways, that 7.4% budget increase. Also, we're asking for our statewide public service programs, our extension ag experiment stations, forest research laboratories that will also have to find that 6%, as well as our state programs, which include our diagnostics laboratory, our fermentation science, marine research vessel that we do research and take high school students out on in the study of STEM and oceanography. So we're going to be working to see what type of resources can be made available. We do know that the other stimulus package has just come through. We know what our allocation will be. It falls well short of the shortfall that we have as a university, which is $151 million that we're not getting. And most of that is in auxiliaries and students that stayed at home and didn't move into the residence halls. And a big chunk of it's in athletics, which we're looking at about a $38 million loss in athletics, almost $40 million. So we're all reeling right now, but I know our budget is as well. And we're going to be working to get more federal stimulus money in Representative Gomberg's hands and the governor's hands so that we can ride through this wave and ride through it together. So I think that's perhaps the biggest ask that we're making, is to see if they can come up with resources that can help us with that 6% mandated cost growth that's in pensions, it's in energy, it's in things that we can't control.
Katie, could I add a legislative perspective to the president's very comprehensive overview there? Let's make it very clear to start out with that the governor's recommended budget is exactly that, a recommended budget, which is then reviewed by the legislature over the course of the next 6 months. Now, I serve on the Ways and Means Committee. I co-chair one of our subcommittees, which deals with economic development and transportation rather than higher education. But what I can tell you is, excuse me, the budget process is already running behind schedule. That the governor's recommended budget came out a little bit late, and the legislative review of that first draft of a budget is also running slowly. And you would say, well, why on earth is that going on? And the answer is that the Legislative Fiscal Office has been tied up this year working with the Emergency Board, which in normal circumstances meets once or twice during an interim, but this past year has met, I believe, 15 times and allocated close to $2 billion in money for wildfire and COVID and economic relief. So we're running slowly, but we are beginning now the process of reviewing this proposed budget. And I will say that there is generally an understanding and a sympathy within the Capitol for the fact that higher education needs more than that which has been recommended. Now, are we going to have the resources to provide more? That, of course, is the critical question. And just as everything else has been unusual this year, our budget has been unusual. We had early on concerns that we were going to have some major shortfalls. People weren't working, so they weren't paying income taxes. Businesses were closed, so they weren't paying corporate taxes. Restaurants and taverns were closed, so we weren't selling lottery tickets that lead to lottery bonds that we use for critical new construction. About the only place that we were actually bringing in more money was the sale of alcohol and cannabis, which was not going to generate enough money to make up the difference. The more recent revenue forecasts have been a bit more reassuring that we're bringing in more tax dollars than we thought we might. The legislature has been very conservative in spending, which gives us a better carryover, but the governor's budget is still quite dependent on federal dollars coming in, and it remains to be seen whether those dollars will be available. So again, there is sympathy and understanding that higher education needs more than was recommended, but there's still at this early point a great deal of uncertainty on how much money we've got.
Thank you for that. And Representative Gomberg, when you talk to your colleagues about Oregon State, I think it would be of interest. What do you share? What do you think are the key points to share? And especially around OSU's presence in your district?
Well, goodness, I'm a former student body president. People know where my loyalties are. And I'm not the only former ASOSU president serving in the House. My colleague Brian Clem from the Salem area is also a former student body president. I talk an awful lot about OSU Newport. And I should have worn my my Oregon State University Newport t-shirt for all of you today. But for more than 50 years, the Hatfield Center at the Central Coast has been providing a critical role in the economies and education and understanding of the ocean. And in the last 10 years, that presence has increased dramatically with our investment in the new Marine Science Studies Center. We're proud of the work that Hatfield has done historically, but we are rapidly emerging as the preeminent institution, not only on the Pacific coast, not only on the US coastline, but globally on the question of ocean science. And if we are going to have the understanding to begin to address the climate challenge, arguably one of the most critical challenges of our generation and future generations, if we're going to understand ocean acidification and ocean hypoxia and rising tide levels and ocean warming and on and on and on, that understanding is going to come from the infrastructure and the researchers that Oregon State University has located out here at the coast. I'm sure if you had brought on a beaver from Bend, they would be singing a different song about the role that Oregon State plays in the Central Coast, or that the extension services provide in our agriculture and forestry communities. But I'm a coastie, and I'm critically interested in what's going on at OSU Newport.
That's great. President Alexander, looking at education in a much broader realm, could you share with us what's OSU's place in the education spectrum and what role OSU's plays beyond higher ed in Oregon?
Well, let me kind of tackle that from the front end. We have multiple roles in the state, and right now you're seeing it. I mean, we're the only enterprise that's proactively testing communities to see how infected they are with COVID. And we've been doing that since the beginning through our TRACE program. And we've gone into Eugene, we've gone into Springfield, we've gone into Bend, Newport, Hermiston, we constantly do it here in Corvallis and Benton and Lynn County. So our work that goes well beyond the classroom. But more importantly, I think as we come out of this pandemic, we've learned a number of things. First of all, that I'm thrilled that we got engaged with our e-campus almost 20 years ago. And we've been working at it to provide one of the best e-campuses in the nation, if not the best, along with probably Arizona State and Southern New Hampshire University. We have the three best e-campuses, nearly 8,000 students, 9,000 students are on our e-campus. It grew this year by 22%. These are students that aren't going to pick up and relocate. These are students that may not even be in Oregon or may not even be in the United States. Many of them aren't. So we're prepared to reach multiple populations. Our traditional age population that most people thought bricks and mortar campuses would have gone away by 2020 because of technology. No, it's not true. In fact, many of our students, half of our students that we gave the option to stay at home and learn remotely, or you can come here and learn remotely, they came to Corvallis and they came to Oregon State. So we currently have nearly half of our students in Corvallis or on campus. About half of our residence halls are full because they would rather come here, even if they're learning remotely, and which tells us that we're still going to have the traditional age population coming to our campus. But something else our e-campus in this pandemic has taught us is that we have many, many more faculty that have learned how to teach remotely and learned how to teach by Zoom, which means that now maybe we can open up to the 800,000 people in Oregon who have some degree, some college, but no degree. This gives us the opportunity to reach them where they are. So I think that the opportunities for growth and expansion, whether it's at our Cascades campus or in Corvallis, or just to the population that needs us throughout Oregon is going to be even greater every year. And our way to reach them and the tools that we can reach them with our great internationally renowned degrees, that we can reach them where they are much easier and much better now. So I think we've got a much broader mission. We need to help our schools. We need to help our high school graduation rates get better. That's our job. We need to help our agriculture communities who are starting to understand how global climate change is impacting our harvest and impacting the crops, or impacting the grape wine industry through the wildfire smoke that we're working on right now in one of our laboratories. We've got multiple responsibilities. Our Ag Center, our Ag College of Agriculture is engaged in 220 different commodities that are produced in Oregon. So I think there's just about everywhere you go, Oregon State University is touching people's lives in multiple ways. And we just need to keep doing that and serving our state and serving our region. And let other institutions worry about where they rank in some private magazine in New York or Boston. We don't care about that. We want to serve Oregon. We want to serve this state and help it grow economically and become and advance equity throughout the state. So we're giving opportunities to everybody.
Could you expand a little bit and talk about Oregon State's youth programming as well?
So our youth programming, this is another advantage that no other university has. We may have 33,500 students that are enrolled in our college programs and our courses, which is an all-time record. But we've got over 100,000 kids in the K through 12 schools that are in Oregon State programs, 4-H, the forest programs, the programs that we provide all throughout the state through Extension and through our College of Agriculture. So in many ways, I say we have over 100,000 pre-college or pre-Oregon State University students that are already involved in Oregon State University programs. Our job is to keep them in Oregon and to most likely make sure that they come to Oregon State as they get older. So we're involved. We're very engaged in the pre-college students. That's what I call them. And we're going to be even more engaged with our public schools, working with our public schools to help the graduation rate get better, to set new sights on college expectation. That's our job. For me, Oregon State students, they don't become students when they show up at orientation. Actually, they become students in Oregon for Oregon State University in preschool and kindergarten. That's where our graduation rate really starts. It's not as a freshman in college, but in preschool and kindergarten. And that's our role, and that's the mission that we need to have all of our deans engaged in. This isn't just a college of education issue. This is an issue all of our deans are engaged in, and will continuously get better, more engaged in as we go forward.
Thank you. President Alexander, could you also talk about for when those students do come to Oregon State, what would be the impacts of the renovations of Cordley Hall and the construction of the Student Success Center at the Cascades campus have for our students and their success?
So those are the two big projects that are in the governor's budget. We thank the governor for putting them in there. Cordley Hall is about an $86 million renovation, and it's a science facility. It's science and STEM, as you know. 47% of every student in college in Oregon that's studying STEM is at Oregon State. We have 1 out of 2 studying STEM. So Cordley Hall impacts that 1 out of 2 students that are at Oregon State to study STEM engineering. And Cordley Hall is vitally important to get. We have phase 1 done. We need phase 2 and 3 done. So Cordley Hall is an absolute necessity for us in the governor's budget, but also the Cascade Student Success Center. The students have raised $3.5 million or $4 million to go towards a student success center, which is a one-stop shop for students in terms of financial aid, advising, counseling, student government. It gives them a place to go to get the services that they need, that they voted themselves to help fund. And we're asking the state legislature for $13.8 million to match what the students have raised at our Cascades campus, so that we can grow and expand, which we are. As I mentioned, the fastest growing campus in the state is in Bend. And so we need that success center to advance, to not just make sure our students are enrolling at OSU Cascades, but they're also finishing what they started.
Thank you. And Representative Gomberg, you mentioned earlier that you are a former ASOSU president. Can you share with us how a little more about that experience while you were at Oregon State and how that has impacted you and influenced you as a legislator?
Goodness, well, you're asking me to squint into the distant past, aren't you? I graduated, I got my bachelor's in political science in 1976. I got my master's of interdisciplinary studies, economics, history, and political science in 77, and served as student body president during that time. So it was a while back, Katie. But let me tell you that that experience on campus was transformative for me. You know, the young, wide-eyed man that arrived in Corvallis in the early 70s was much different than the still young and still wide-eyed young man who left a few years later. And through student government in particular, I began to better understand how government can affect people's lives. It's a message that I learned and that stayed with me through the course of my early careers, which were in fact in government. I went to work in the Capitol for a freshman legislator from Portland named Barbara Roberts. And worked a couple of sessions there, but then worked for the state for a few years before I moved over here to the coast and started our small business. But I always remember that lesson that government has the ability to affect people's lives in very personal ways. How good the street is that goes past your house, the quality of the education your kids have, the kind of healthcare that's available for your parents. All of those are things that we can affect with the proper choices of policy and budgets. And that's a lesson I learned at Oregon State. It certainly provided me with the skills that I used throughout my career in managing personal budgets and managing public budgets, in communicating with people and articulating my ideas and understanding the delicate balance that is in effect among people who have contrasting ideas and experiences and backgrounds. You know, that's an important lesson in the Oregon legislature. I fear that the divisions in Oregon between red and blue, between rural and urban, have grown deeper and wider these past few years. I think we have long prided ourselves on the fact that here in Oregon, we don't suffer some of the challenges that we have seen at the national level, for example. And somebody once confronted me at a town hall and said, David, you vote with the Democratic leadership 96% of the time. And I said, well, yes, but if you look at the record, you'll see I vote with the Republican leadership 92% of the time, because 90% of the time we're voting the same. That's been the Oregon model. I don't live in red Oregon. I don't live in blue Oregon. I live in purple Oregon. And it's important we understand that I think that we have more in common than we do separating us. That too is a lesson that I learned at Oregon State. I mean, we even have things in common with the Ducks more than we have separating us. And that's what makes Oregon very special.
I appreciate that perspective. And I have to share with you that Metzen Rodriguez, who's the ASOSU vice president, is with us watching today. So,
and Katie, I noticed a question coming from, it said an anonymous, it may be one of our students, and I'd like to ask Representative Gomberg, in this environment, I mean, in a normal environment, students, what can students do to help the budget request? And in a normal environment, you can rally, you can walk the halls. Our interns are everywhere in the Capitol, in the offices of both Republicans and Democrats. But in this environment, I'm curious as well. What can our students do to help, knowing that we're going to be in this lockdown mode probably throughout the entire spring? But what can our students do to influence or to show support as we go forward?
Great question. And I'll start by saying this, that I believe that that our students are more effective, more experienced, more tech savvy communicators, certainly than I am. And in this unique environment, communication is critical, but we need to find new and effective ways to manage that communication. Now, let me say one other thing. Your students, of course, are based there in Corvallis. Corvallis legislators are with us. They are with us on the budget issues. They are with us on the higher education issues. It's people in other parts of Oregon that we need to communicate with. So when your students want to affect these policy and budget issues, they can do that through their own neighborhoods back home, talking to their parents, communicating with the legislators that represent the areas that they came to Corvallis from. We need to broaden the coalition that understands the importance and the breadth and the consequences of higher education. So use those connections, talk to your parents, talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, and make sure that we're not only trying to influence votes in Corvallis, but votes across the entire state.
Thank you.
I think my next question is for both of you, and I think it's a great segue from that last question. I'd like you both, maybe starting with President Alexander, if you could share about your role as an advocate and what you see as important roles of advocates, why it's important to hear from higher ed advocates through the process, and any tips or feedback you have for our Beaver Caucus members.
Well, I'd say that relationships mean a lot. And many of our Beaver Caucus members have very good relationships with our legislative leaders, as well as our business leaders, and many are business leaders. I think that never underestimate the influence that you can have. That's my first word of thought. We're going to need everybody at the table, and what I've experienced, and this will be my 21st legislature that I've dealt with in 4 different states, is that there are going to be times when we need to kill a lot of bills that are bad ideas, that they never ran by us in the first place, but have negligible or negative impact on our institutions. And then there are going to be 3 or 4 big ones that we're going to need everybody, all hands on deck, for the 3 or 4 bills that truly could help higher education and help public higher education. I mean, just take, for example, we've got one bill coming out of Monmouth right now that wants to turn Cascades into Central Oregon University, that create a whole nother bureaucracy and a whole nother, just diminish what we're accomplishing in Bend right now. I think we're going to work on that one, and when we need you, we're going to call you to the table. But that was never run by us. I don't think it was run by anybody, quite honestly. So there are going to be times when we need help to kill things that should have never made it to the floor. And then there are going to be times when we're going to need advocacy and our business leaders and our connected people to make sure that phone calls are made, connections are made when we really need the good bills to go forward.
Well, relationships certainly do matter. I will tell you that I care what all Oregonians think, but I particularly care what the Oregonians that I represent think. And so, there are opportunities in this electronic environment where you could set up a Zoom call to have constituents, a group of constituents, meet with their senator or their representative. And when you do that, don't presume that they know everything. We're expected to know a little bit about an awful lot of stuff. And most legislators are probably not going to know the difference between Sea Grant and the Extension Service. They're not going to understand the role of research. They're not going to understand the relative importance of the Cascade campus or the Newport campus or the main campus. So don't presume that they know everything, but also at the same time, don't bog them down in too many, in the minutia. Make the point and move on effectively. When we are in Salem, we typically operate in a system that I refer to as legislative speed dating. And I will have appointments literally every 15 minutes when I'm not on the floor or not in a committee meeting. And I'll have somebody come in and talk to me about highways. And then I'll have somebody who wants to come and talk to me about foster kids. And then somebody's going to want to talk to me about the effects of that Wi-Fi has on their health care or their personal health. I mean, the issues just continue to unroll all day long in 15-minute increments. But grab one of those 15-minute bites and get a handful of people and make sure that the people that are meeting with a legislator actually come from that legislator's district. The other thing that I should emphasize is that the Oregon legislature focuses on a committee-driven process. It's not about getting the votes on the floor as much as it is about getting the votes in committee. And the committees are going to be the places where these budget decisions are hammered out, or these policy issues are hammered out, amended, fine-tuned, and passed out. Most of the issues that come out of committee and go to the floor will pass. And so it's a point of making sure that that you get them coming out of the committee the way you want them to, or if you don't like the issue, making sure it doesn't come out of committee. So if you're going to organize some of those Zoom meetings, it's better to organize them with some of the legislators that are on the front line of the decisions that you're trying to influence, and that's the people that are in the relevant committees.
Representative Gomberg, we have a follow-up question from one of your former colleagues, Greg McPherson. And so he's asking, when Beaver Caucus advocates meet virtually with legislators, how much information about campus programs, including the extension service or our research, need to be shared? I think he's really wondering how much breadth do legislators already know about what OSU does?
Well, I think that depends on the legislator and their background, their district, and also the amount of legislative experience that they've got. As I said, about a third of the members coming in are brand new, and they're drinking from the fire hose right now, learning a lot about a myriad of different issues. I would say don't presume that they understand the breadth of Oregon State. It's important to explain how OSU affects them and their district and their constituents. The other thing it's important to do when you go into these meetings is to make sure you have a clear and concise ask. What is it you want? What is it you're asking for? How can the legislature reach the destination that you'd like to see us get to on a particular issue? So, don't presume too much, don't presume too little. It probably helps to do a little research and get a little guidance before you go in. But again, I keep coming back to the part that legislators want to hear from their own constituents, and they want to hear how a particular issue, in this case, higher education at Oregon State University, is going to affect their district. So in my district, a legislator or a senator might want to hear about the Hatfield Center and its connection to ocean science, the ocean economy, and to the fishing fleet. If I were from the eastern part of Oregon, I might want to hear about the Ag Experimental Station, crop science research, and how those new developments are going to help their economy. If I were from the Portland area, I might want to hear about tech and innovation and how that's providing new job opportunities for today's high school graduates and where they're going to be in 5 years.
That's great. Thank you. Well, I want to thank you both for joining us this afternoon. Thank you again, President Alexander, Representative Gomberg, for sharing your insights. on both OSU and House District 10's priorities, tips. Just I think it's been a really insightful discussion. To the attendees today, want to thank your participation and taking time to learn more about Oregon State's legislative agenda and the Beaver Caucus. If you'd like to learn more about these issues and become an advocate for OSU, I encourage you to join the Beaver Caucus. We'll be posting about OSU's key legislative priorities and updates throughout the legislative session on the Beaver Caucus website. And again, that's up on the screen, thebeavercaucus.org. And also encourage you to like the Beaver Caucus Facebook page and track that during the legislative session. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon and you have some sun shining in your area. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks
Thank
so much,
you.
everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Representative Gomberg.